Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to the July edition of Molten Music Monthly. Now, it's a little bit weird because it's been a baking hot day, a baking hot week here in the not normally quite so sunny Norfolk, and it's been too flipping hot to do anything. And so I'm finding myself doing this video quite late in the evening. There's probably people having barbecues just over the way who are wondering who this person is who's speaking quite loudly all by himself. And that'll be me, and I'm sorry about that. But the summer has got pretty serious over here. I mean, we just went to Cromer for chips and we've just come back from that, which was awesome, which is also why my hair's so fluffy. And also that's why I'm outside, and yet I've got to use a light because the light is going to go. Although the sky, I have to say, is beautiful. So putting my self-consciousness aside for the moment, I can tell you that we have a magical foot switch that roots CV by Sleight of Hand. Modal surprises with a weird looking sort of futuristic synthesizer. The Analogue Solutions sequencer gets a name. Elektron turn up the heat, and Overbridge might actually exist. VCV Rack gets a VST version, and Voltage Modular comes back from wherever it's been hiding. WTF finds a new way to morph waveforms. A new cheaper surface sort of goes for it. Tim Exile wants to indoctrinate us into Endlesss. Hungry Robot Modular is jamming Eurorack modules into little stomp boxes. All this and more right here on Molten's Music Monthly. But first, as you know, I'm never one to shy away from a little bit of politics, and we had a whole load of hoo-ha around the 25% tax tariff trade import thing that the Lord President Trump has imposed upon imports from China. Aimed presumably at encouraging American manufacturing, Moog Music threw shade on this whole idea by suggesting that this 25% tax increase is going to harm their productivity. They might have to lay people off. They may even have to move their manufacturing overseas or have to stifle their customers for huge price hikes. Well, the internet went crazy. I mean, Moog were encouraging all their customers to contact their senators and protest at this new trade tariff thingy. And I imagine it's not really the sort of result that Trump was after. And obviously, at sort of a first look, it does seem rather nuts. However, after kind of a lot of anger and hyperbole and finger waving and general shouting on the internet, a couple of manufacturers did start pointing out that actually, or perhaps, the tariff doesn't really apply to the sort of manufacturing that they're talking about, to the sort of components and bits and pieces that they buy. I mean, it's true that there is a 25% tariff on certain components coming over from China and certain PCBs, and this does have an effect on things, but the effect is probably not quite what is being implied by Moog. Particularly vocal about this was Paul T. Schreiber from SynthTech. I mean, he builds some extremely awesome Eurorack modules, and he pointed out that a tariff was actually only on quite a narrow selection of components, and that actually components are really just a tiny fraction of the cost of a synthesizer as a whole. So capacitors, for instance, are subject to the new tariff, and he would buy a reel of capacitors for about $30. A reel is about 4,000 capacitors. He may use 200 capacitors in the build of a particular module, and so with the price increase that would kind of total up about 38 cents per unit. So that's the sort of price that he says they would just absorb naturally in the scheme of things and wouldn't even really pass that on down to the customer because it's peanuts. It's not much at all. Now, there are industries where this is having a greater impact. I mean, Harley-Davidson is a good example, for instance, where the prices of those have skyrocketed over places like the UK. But Paul suggests that synthesizers are not really an area that's going to get affected that much. I mean, provided that you are purchasing the right components, that they are labeled correctly, that they have the correctly declared commodity codes, and all of that business, then there shouldn't be any reason why they need to increase massively in price. If a manufacturer is being lazy and just sort of sharing containers with other people and not specifying exactly what's on the docket, well then they might well be subject to blanket 25% increases. And certainly the problem with these sorts of things is that everyone assumes there's going to be a massive increase and so applies it in various places, so we end up paying it anyway. So I don't know what the answer is to all that. I don't know what's right or what's wrong. All I can say is that trade should be as simple as possible. And once people start using it as bargaining chips in political situations, it just gets us nowhere. It's not helpful to anybody. I don't understand how in a global market any of that is particularly helpful. But there was certainly something that spooked Moog. I don't believe that they just decided to use it as some kind of political hammer against the Trump machine. I'm not so sure about that. There was definitely a worry there and a concern enough for them to go public with it and to try to seek out some kind of solution. At the same time, Paul from SynthTech is talking a lot of sense. So I don't know, let's move on. Now here's something small and interesting. It's a little foot switch from Trick's Magic Shop, who seem to perhaps be in the wrong business. It's called Sleight of Hand, and it's a little box. There's a little box with a foot switch on it, and it switches between 3 different sets of patch sockets. So you've got like 3 inputs, each with 2 outputs. And when you hit the switch, it switches from output A to output B. So you could, for instance, have a sequence going in, which you switch between 2 different oscillators. Or you could have 2 sequences going in the other way around and having that switch to 1 output. It's really, really very nifty. I mean, it means you keep your hands all over the knobs and bits. You don't have to take them off to try to do a bit of switching. You can do it with your foot on the floor and no one would even notice that you were doing it. It's just a neat, simple, helpful, performance-orientated little bit of kit that could help you move control voltages all over your modular rack while you are performing. It's available in Buchla, Moog Unit and Euro Rack versions for about $90. Skulpt is a funny looking, sort of futuristic style synthesizer from Modal. I can't believe the word sculpt has never been used before in the sort of the world of sound design and synthesizers. Inside Skulpt is a massive polyphonic virtual analog synthesizer. It's got 4 voices with 8 oscillators per voice, morphable waveforms, 3 envelopes, 2 LFOs, and a whacking great big morphing filter. There's a sequencer, arpeggiator, a weird kind of touch keyboard thing. I mean, it looks a bit like the sort of the knobs bit at the top is sat on it and could slide across it, but I mean, apparently it doesn't. Although there may be future synthesizers in this similar vein, and I wonder whether that top bit just comes off and you could replace it with a different one. I don't know, I'm just making this up. It's currently on Kickstarter and you can pick one up for $249. They have already smashed their goal and a couple of stretch goals, which includes sticking a lid on the top, which is quite nice, and also doing one completely in black. There's a software app to get you deep into the synthesis, but overall it looks like a sort of poshly designed, natty little winner. Elektron released a new version of their desktop analog heat distortion effect module. Hasn't changed very much. They've upgraded the knobs, the encoders, the screen of course gets the screen of the other more recent products, and the sound engine has had a little bit of an overhaul. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same, except for this supports version 2 of Overbridge. Version 2 of Overbridge. I mean, the Analog Heat is probably one of the only Elektron devices that actually supports the version 1 Overbridge, whereas this one doesn't. It only supports version 2. This is the mythical version 2 that they've been promising now for years. I think years. Every time Elektron release a new product, one of the big key features is the fact that it's Overbridge compatible. The only problem being is that Overbridge just keeps failing to materialize. However, they have very recently announced a closed beta of Overbridge 2, which means that real people out there in the world could actually be using it. It could exist. It could happen. And that's pretty awesome. So if you have an Analog Heat version 1, you can apply to beta test it now, although you will have to upgrade the firmware, which kills the compatibility with version 1. But never mind, into the future, eh? And what's Overbridge all about? Well, I'm not sure that anyone can really remember, but whatever it is, it's going to be awesome. There was a really cool tabletop sequencer at Superbooth this year from Analogue Solutions. Analogue Solutions make that big fuse box thing and those tabletop treadstone bits and pieces. Really good, solid British synthesizers. And they had this sort of dodgy looking prototype laid out on the table, all these rows of knobs and stuff and handwritten labels and bits and bobs, but they've now finally got that together. It's got a name, they're calling it Generator, and it's got a rather nice black front panel, and it's shaping up to look pretty darn interesting. Generator is a 3-channel analog sequencer with 3 channels of 16 knobs running on the top, so you can see exactly what's going on at all times with little light up LEDs. It's also a drum pattern sequencer and performance, sort of transposing, wrangling, pattern, firing, polyrhythmicking tool. I guess you could compare it to something like the Arturia Beatstep Pro, or maybe then again you can't. It has these great light up knobs that light in the top to show you where you are in the pattern, and it's got these 6 weird keys down on one side which let you transpose and also fire off different patterns. It has all the usual functions with control over length and glide and accents and whatnot, and it even does MIDI. I mean, it looks like a proper chunky piece of gear. You know, it's not refined like the Poly End or kind of futuristic and flashing lights like the Beatstep Pro. Oh no, this is British gear, I'll have you know. And they have already sold out of the first bunch of pre-orders, which we're hoping to be available in September. So if you want one, get yourself on the next list and you might see one by the end of the year. VCV Rack's virtual Euro rack community just seems to continue to skyrocket in terms of development and new stuff that comes out for it all the time. One bright spark has just sort of rewritten or recaptured the code into some kind of VST wrapper so that you can now run it as a VST plugin. That's something which VCV Rack has had a lot of trouble with. It's had sort of difficulty connecting itself to your DAW. There is now this bridge sort of software which allowed you, a bit like Rewire I think, to run the audio out from VCV Rack into your DAW. But running it, you know, within a DAW with everything that that means has been a struggle and a difficulty, and this is perhaps one way of getting that done. It's been created by a bloke calling himself BSP804, and it's open source like everything else. It's only really compatible with the base number of modules. Any other third-party modules would need to also be rewritten to get inside it, so it's not just a simple wrapper. It does require the code to be changed in order for it to work. He's hoping to get it taken on officially by VCV Rack, which could make it very interesting and potentially very awesome. We're just going to have to sort of see what happens with that, but you can go and download it now and try it out and see what you think. Meanwhile, the VCV Rack Audio Instruments Preview plugin has just got Marbles. Yes, that's right. This is a preview plugin, they call it, from Mutable Instruments, which allowed you to run much more recent Mutable Instruments modules straight within VCV Rack. I mean, it's flipping awesome. You get these things for free. I mean, a plugin costs you $20 to start with, and that all goes to charity, apparently, but then the modules for it are free. And currently you have a Platts, and now you have the Marbles, which they're calling the Random Sampler, because that's what it's called. And it looks and is, and the functionality is exactly like the hardware. It's amazing. I mean, the idea is that it gives you an opportunity to try out the Mutable Instruments hardware without buying the hardware. So you can try it out in VCV Rack, see if you like it, and then decide to make a purchase based on that. It's not completely flawless though. There are a couple of things which are missing, because in the Marbles there are some functions you access by holding a button and turning a knob, and you can't actually do that in VCV Rack. You can only do one thing at a time. If they had written it to be touch compatible, then that would not have been a problem. But as it is, there's a couple of little bits missing. But on the whole, you get the whole Marbles experience. Marbles is a randomizer. It can chuck out channels of random voltages and channels of random gates in very interesting and manipulable, controllable and tweakable ways. It's a very cool thing. Now, last month I asked the question, what on earth has happened to Voltage Modular? Well, it was answered pretty soon afterwards when I received an email from Voltage Modular saying, hey, would you like to try out the new beta version? To which I said, okay. I've done a video of my first impressions, which is probably going on over here somewhere, so do go and check that out. But I'm going to be doing a lot more videos on it as I get to grips with it. But it comes with over 70 modules, all the usual stuff. It has oscillators and filters and so many utilities I can't quite believe it. It also has a polyphonic oscillator, which is very interesting. And the beta version comes with this whole sort of drum machine business, which is like an 808 drum machine in Eurorack, with a whole bunch of really cool drum modules. I think that's an added extra in the release version. And in fact, it's sort of got in-app purchasing built directly in. There's a tab down the side and you can buy extra modules and bits and pieces for it, which will hopefully mean that the standard software itself should be, you know, pretty cheap, hopefully good value, because then they'll try to make their money on the add-ons afterwards, perhaps. I don't know. It looks a lot like Reason, actually. It has that kind of flavor to it, that kind of style, which is good. It's very friendly, it's very colorful, but it also perhaps is on the edge of looking a tad dated. I don't know, the jury's still out on that. But one of the things I really like, because you know I like little quirky things, is that when you connect up a patch cable, a virtual patch cable, of course, you get a virtual little dot running down the cable to show you the direction of flow, which is a lovely idea. See, that's using software effectively, because that's not something you could do easily in hardware, but you can in software. So why not do that? It has a whole load of presets. They're all very interesting and engaging, and there's lots of stuff going on in there, and it has masses of potential. It's very smooth, it's very slick, the way the modules move around when you drop them in and stuff. Yeah, it's good. It's not perhaps as authentic looking as Softube Modular, or as kind of futuristic and funky as VCV Rack, but I think it could well have a place in our range of virtual modular stuff. If you do go and watch the other video, I just should point out that I made a fuss about the lack of ASIO drivers in the standalone version, but Cherry Audio have said to me that the ASIO implementation will be there in the next build. So that's not going to be a continuing problem, it's just something that's not in the current beta. But it's cool, it's colourful, it's modular synthesis and stuff, so look out for more videos coming down the line very, very soon. A new oscillator appeared on Kickstarter recently called the WTF Oscillator, which is an annoyingly unfortunate name, which evokes all kind of sort of angry and dismissive and finger pointing kind of ideas, and you imagine it's going to have a very brutal sound, when in fact this is actually quite a lovely thing. WTF actually stands for Windows Transform Function. The idea is that you have two waveforms, a front waveform and a rear waveform, and what you do is open a gap in the front waveform, or a window if you like, and let the rear one shine through. So it sort of combines these two waveforms together by not mixing them together, but by making sort of room for each other, weirdly. And that allows you to create some sort of new and interesting waveforms. It comes with 32 waveforms and a noise source all built in, giving you loads of scope for morphing between these different waves and generating some very interesting tones. It seems, you know, pretty ridiculously simple really, but terribly effective. It was designed by Paul Maddox, who also designed, or used to design, for Modal. So there's no doubt that the quality is going to be really up there. You can open one or two windows, and there's also the ability to put in kind of a DC offset, which creates a kind of a pulse width modulation going on any of the waveforms. Very interesting. There's something slightly unbalanced, I think, about the front panel, but that's just a small thing, and maybe that's just me. But otherwise, it's a very cool, unfortunately named thing. Tim Exile has got a new thing going on. Tim Exile is the creator of some of the most interesting reactor instruments, like flesh, like the mouth, the finger. He's also created a bunch of his own weird bits and pieces that create awesome sounds in strange and alarming places. And he spent much of his performing life working on this thing called the Flow Machine. It's sort of a combination of software and hardware controllers, all sort of laid out on a table, that enables him to perform sort of spontaneously and to create on the fly in an electronically musical space. Tim has sort of come to a realization over the years that much of the joy that you find in creativity is lost once you start massaging it and working on it and perfecting it in the studio. And so Tim is very much about the idea of retaining all of the joy and creativity as you perform, as you make music, to somehow push back or resist the urge to perfect things, to make things musically perfect, to work all the joy out of stuff. And that seems like a worthwhile thing to me. Anyway, he's created a bit of a community and got together and been talking about this, and for the last couple of years been working out a way to take his flow machine off his desk and somehow present it to the rest of us as a tool that we can use for the same sort of ends. So Tim has sort of re-emerged with his arms wide saying, please come, follow me into the flow machine, join the flow, and you too can be released from the constraints of perfectionism, the constraints of the studio system, of the way that these tools fight us down and chain us up and drain us of our joy. And let's step forward into the chaotic creation of musical imperfection, chaos and performance. And let's do it together. Or something like that. He's very charismatic. But anyway, so he's created this new thing called Endlesss. Endless with too many S's on the end, for reasons that I don't think are going to become clear at the moment. But what it seems to be, what I predict it will be, is some kind of combination of hardware and software that's going to enable people to perform electronic music on the fly, spontaneously, like picking up an instrument and just playing it without getting dragged down into the production side of things, keeping everything in the creative space. And that sounds flipping awesome. I mean, the one thing I know about Tim Exile is that he really delivers. He does what he says. I mean, all of his stuff is great. His software instruments are fabulous. The way he's put his flow machine together is great. And the couple of times I've met the guy and had conversations with him, I can totally say that he seems to be a really decent and interesting chap. So I have every confidence that this could get very interesting indeed. Out of nowhere, a guitar pedal firm called Hungry Robot has released a bunch of Eurorack modules that are actually sort of stuffed inside guitar effects boxes. They're not guitar effects boxes, but they're that sort of size of box. Now, the genius thing about this is that you have these individual modules sitting in their own little box on your desktop. Each one is self-contained, each one is Eurorack compatible and Eurorack patchable, and all of them run on a simple 9-volt guitar effect power supply. So this means that you could add a Eurorack module to your setup without having to buy a case and power supply, without having to get hold of a huge Eurorack thing or make a decision on how many rows of stuff you're going to have and all of the expense and the cost and putting all that together. This bypasses all that completely. You've just got bam, an oscillator, bam, a filter, bam, an LFO, a mixer, an envelope, all these sorts of things, and you can patch them together and you can use it completely standalone as an independent modular system, or you can thread it into your existing setup, either if you've got a Eurorack setup or probably more likely if you've got a semi-modular. If you've got a semi-modular like the No Coast or the Mother 32 or one of those Behringer clones that have got patch bays on them, you can just expand yourself. You can sort of just breathe into a slightly larger space. You can add a second oscillator, you could add another modulator, you can have another filter, add a filter to the No Coast, for instance. That's pretty brilliant, and you can patch that directly in just by getting one or two of these. It's like a softly entry into Eurorack without having to deep dive the whole thing with everything. I'm getting eaten alive. There are 13 modules in total, VCAs, VCFs, LFOs, a little sequencer, a little keyboard thingy, a mixer, a slew, a sample and hold, all sorts of bits and pieces, all the usual sorts of building blocks of modular. They cost from about $75 to $150, which is pretty good value in the Eurorack world, and you can power them directly from a guitar, stomp box, wall wart. It's a totally brilliant idea. I think it's the best thing I've seen in ages. So if you've ever been, Eurorack curious, but just too daunted by the idea of getting hold of a case and a rack and everything that means, then this is perfect. Perfect for you. Perfect if you've got a semi-modular and just want to expand a bit. Or perfect if you've got, say, I don't know, 500 quid to put down on a modular system. Get a bunch of those and off you go. Genius. The Arturia DrumBrute has had a little brother. They're calling it Impact. DrumBrute Impact. It's more compact, it's smaller, it has fewer sounds, fewer tracks, fewer outputs. They've lost the filter, which seems mad, but they've replaced that with a distortion circuit. And apparently, overall, it sounds pretty unique, pretty independent of the DrumBrute, and has its own kind of character and color to itself, which makes it very interesting indeed. Apparently everyone has one. Arturia did this massive marketing splurge where they just sent them out to everyone like a little while before release, so that on the day they did release it, there'd be all these very cool videos from very cool people all showing everybody how cool it was all at once. Except me. They didn't send one to me. But I'm not bothered by that sort of thing. But apparently everyone had a really good time. The only thing with that, I think, is that you kind of blow everything all in one go. I mean, first of all, there's a massive possibility of something getting leaked. And of course, something did. We did hear about it a day or two beforehand, because there's so many of them out there that it's just, you know, it's just bound to happen. And then you've got all these creators, all these influencers, all these really cool YouTube people sort of vying and competing for views. And so it ends up that kind of Arturia makes none of them feel particularly special because everyone has one. Well, as I say, except for me. So I don't feel special at all. Maybe it shouldn't be done that way. Maybe they should release a product, you know, with their own marketing video and then farm a few out for reviews so that other videos come in drips and drabs and bits and pieces, and it just keeps the level of consciousness about it going. It keeps it going because we've forgotten about it already. There's no way I was going to watch 20 videos on the Impact. You know, I watched one or maybe two and then I kind of ignored all the rest. So I'm not entirely sure what having this massive amount of media about it really achieved. It's kind of like whoop, and then it just drops straight away. Wouldn't it be better just to have something bubbling along a bit more? I don't know. But anyway, as a drum machine, it's got all your sequencing in there, your rolling, your flamming, your ratcheting, your pattern bass, this, that, and the other, polyrhythms going on. Some great sounds, some great alternative sounds to the sounds that are there, and this distortion, which apparently is excellent. So if you want a cool little drum machine, then that, well, you know, apparently, because I've not actually played on one, is the one to get. And finally, there's a new Surface in town. Oh yes, it's called the Surface Go. Because I guess this is the first one to be portable. No, weren't they all portable? Oh, I don't know. They haven't even put an exclamation mark at the end. I mean, I'd understand if it was the Surface Go, but there's no exclamation mark. It's just Surface Go. Surface Go. Surface Go. Essentially, it's the successor to the Surface 3. Not the Surface Pro, the Surface 3. Which was introduced back in 2015. I have one. I use my Surface 3 for Netflix and sort of streaming music. But when I did first get it, I ran a whole load of music production software on it and tests, and it actually did all right. Only had a little Atom processor in there, but it could run a few plugins, it could run a few instruments. Yeah, not too bad. So the Surface Go has a much more recent Intel Pentium processor inside. Should be, could be, might be more powerful. It's available in 4 gig and 8 gigabyte memory versions with 64 gigs of storage or 128 gigs of storage. And I have pre-ordered one, and I'm going to put it through the whole gamut of music production tests just to see what it can do, because it starts at $379, which is not a bad price for a proper Surface tablet hybrid thing running proper desktop software. And that's the point, really. That's why I like these Surface things, is because you're running proper music software. This isn't just running music apps like you do on an iPad. Not that an iPad isn't excellent, it's awesome, it's wonderful, fantastic, yeah. But with the Surface, you can run Pro Tools, you can run Ableton Live and Bitwig and all those other things and do it properly. So it's going to be interesting to see what sort of performance you can get out of it. Could it run something like Track 01 from Native Instruments? Could it do something interesting like that? Could it be a Groovebox or a virtual instrument machine for running a few bits and pieces? We shall see. I'm going to try that out. It's out at the end of August and I'll be doing a whole load of stuff on it. Last week I kicked off my modular DIY series. Oh yes, I introduced it, I showed you the tools, I gave you an idea as to what it was I was going to do, and I've been inundated with comments about what I should be doing, what I could be doing, what I might not be doing, things I should do, kits I should get, tips galore on different sorts of solder and bits and pieces. It's definitely something that people are interested in, and lots of people saying, yeah, I've just done this, it's really good, you go do that thing. So I am going to go and do that thing. In fact, my next video will probably be the second in the series, which is going to be about cases and power supplies, DIY style. What does that mean? You're going to have to wait and see, but it's going to be fabulous and probably a little bit infuriating for people because I might cheat, but we shall see. But please, if you have an opinion on what sort of modules I should be doing, then by all means let me know. Please let me know, stick it in the comments and I'll get to it. I've already got an EQ coming from Thonk, who thought I might like to try that out. I also have the sample slicer on its way from the Kickstarter campaign, so I'd like to do that, and I have a low pass gate already. But I kind of want to start with an oscillator and then get into the normal sort of building blocks, but we'll see. So send me your thoughts, send me the ideas, and also make it kits. I don't really want to be doing builds of materials and sourcing my own components at this stage. Just full kits, proper kits, normal kits, through hole, ideally, kits, that sort of thing. I'm also about to do a video all about discovering envelopes. This is not rocket science. Sent me an edge cutter on loan, which is very, very kind, in order to help me grasp and understand envelopes. And it's worked. I knew that it would. It's a fantastic thing. And so I totally understand envelopes now, and I'm going to share the knowledge that I have found with you lovely people. And hopefully that'll be up this week. I've got more software stuff coming on Voltage Modular. I also want to have a look at Cakewalk by BandLab, Waveform 9, anything else I can lay my hands on really and can find the time to squeeze in there. This Sunday we're going to have another stab at the old live stream. Oh yes, I think I'll probably start 10 minutes early this time so that you don't have to waste 10 minutes waiting for me to get my act together and to troubleshoot what the heck and all is going on. I really will try extra super hard not to give you a whole stack of wasted space at the beginning where I'm just faffing around. We're going to go for it. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to talk about all the things I've had this month or other things we can think of, and failing all of that, I'll just make a bit of music and dance around a little bit. So that'll be this Sunday, which is the 29th of July at 8 PM British Summer Time. Come along and join us. It's usually quite good fun, and ask questions and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And a very quick last bit of news about Modularism 2. Now, do you remember a few months ago I got a whole bunch of videos done on how to write a piece of music on Eurorack, how to write a track. How do you go about doing that? Because I was asked to contribute a track to this Modularism 2 CD. And I said, yeah, of course. So I went, and got stuck into trying to produce an actual piece of music, which I'd never done before. It generated a couple of interesting videos and a lot of interest. Well, just found out that it will be released soonish, but it's up for pre-order. It's called Noises Off. And it's got all sorts of really cool people on it, like Future Sound Systems, like Andrew Huang, like Zoe Blade, and Vile Electrodes. And I'm on there too. I'm track 25. It's very exciting. It's a double CD, or available for download, and you can pre-order now. It's not actually released till December, which seems an awful long way away, but you can start getting involved and pre-ordering it now. Why don't you do that? That would be really interesting and really cool. And it was a great project to be involved with. I loved it. It really pushed me into kind of moving up another level in Eurorack and Eurorack music making. Definitely it did that. I learned so much in that. I only had a couple of weeks to do it in, and that was just fantastic. And my music, I have to say now, since then, has just continued, I think, to improve as I've learnt how to use the tools more and better and more creatively and interestingly, experimentally and improvisationally. Oh, I feel myself getting into the flow, maybe moving towards Endlesss. Right, that'll do. I think that's got to do, because it's now the middle of the night and I need to be home. I need to be in my bed. But I'd like to push out a big thank you to all my patrons out there in Patreon land who support me in the making of these videos. You are awesome people, and I wouldn't be able to do all of this if it wasn't for you. So if you're feeling a bit daring, if you like the videos that I do, then please consider popping over to the Patreon page and throwing me a couple of dollars. It's so useful, so vital to what I'm doing here. It's the thing that really pushes me forward and keeps me going, and it's greatly appreciated. And in the meantime, as the dark is closing in, go and make some tunes.